What's going on, guys? I appreciate your patience. John here, Football by the Numbers. Of course, we are bringing you today an exclusive interview with serial football team starter Peter Wilt. Now, if you guys don't know who Peter Wilt is, he was the GM of the Chicago Fire. The Chicago Fire that is crap now, that won one MLS Cup, 3 US Open Cups, a supporter shield. He has started so many soccer teams, I can't even name them all, but you are going to hear this first. Let's get into this. Thank you guys for joining us for this exclusive interview, the first of many to come here on FBTN. Roll the intro.
Well, Peter Wilt, thanks for joining us on the podcast today to help St. Louis fans get to know a little bit more about you. I mean, you're a serial team soccer starter. I mean, most notably, we have Chicago Fire of MLS, the Red Stars of NWSL, Indy 11, and Forward Madison of the USL. I mean, do you even know what your team count is at nowadays?
I think it's 9 officially. Yeah, that I led. There's a couple more that I've kind of helped in the background a little bit, but officially it's 9.
When did you know that doing this was going to be your future career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have another obsession, which is stalking celebrity graves, and in particular baseball graves. And at some point I started stalking the graves of Chicago Black Sox members from the 1919 World Series. The White Sox through the World Series. I went to see Shoeless Joe Jackson's grave when I was just out of college. And it didn't become an obsession or a bucket list thing at that point. Then it was 20 years later, I went to see another player's grave, Happy Felsch. And so that was 2. And then I realized, I could see Buck Weaver too. That's in Chicago. And then all of a sudden I had done 3 and I realized, hey, this is a bucket list. And I started keeping track of the numbers of them. Starting soccer teams was similar, where I think the first time I started one from scratch, it was kind of the Minnesota Thunder. They'd already been around as an amateur team, but I started them as a pro team. And I certainly didn't think at that point that this was going to be my calling. I'd already run a couple of other pro soccer teams at that point, Milwaukee Wave and Chicago Power, both indoor teams. And then I went down and I started the Chicago Fire. And at that point, I didn't think I was going to keep going on and being a Johnny Appleseed of pro soccer teams. In fact, I kind of liked the Chicago Fire gig and hoped I would stay there longer. I stayed there 8 years. And then at some point I got my, 5th new boss over 8 years, and 5th time was the charm, and he wanted someone else in my place, and I went on to start Chicago Red Stars. And maybe it was around the Red Stars time where I started to realize, I've got a knack for this, and not many people now have the experience or the resume that I have, and I'm at the right place at the right time. If I was born 50 years earlier or 50 years later, I don't think it would have worked. But American soccer during my lifetime has been birthing a whole lot of pro soccer teams. So I've been able to do this, and they're all in the Midwest, by the way. I don't think any of the 9 are more than about a 5 or 6 hour drive from my home in Milwaukee.
Do you think you'll settle down with the club in the near future, or?
I had hoped the Chicago House was going to be my last project, and it might be. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. We still don't know what's going to happen with the Chicago House. We played in NISA last year as our inaugural season, and which is a league I started a few years before that. And I fully intended that to be my kind of swan song. Let's do this for 5 or 10 years and then go off in the sunset. And it turns out starting a pro soccer team in the lower division and breaking barriers by doing it in the open system during a worldwide pandemic is not for the faint of heart. And so it's been a struggle. and we're working to find a path forward for Chicago House. And if we're able to, I'll keep plugging along with this and trying to, well, I was going to say create, but maybe it's more perfect the idealistic notion of a democratic and united open system for American soccer. I mean, I still, maybe it's a bit of a dream world, a fantasy world, but I still believe that America can and would support an open system. So that's kind of where my current passion is trying to see that through. But at the same time, I recognize you can't predict the future, and I won't try.
Do you think you could touch on any like lessons that you've kind of learned with Chicago House in this kind of, as you said, it was a little bit challenging through the pandemic and kind of getting them started? Has it brought up you've started 9 teams. Has it kind of brought up any new things that you've never seen in your tenure at starting clubs?
Yeah, I mean, at Chicago House, I think we did a really good job of establishing a brand that was attractive and unique and reflected the market we played in. We paid dearly for it. We invested significantly in it at a time when, as a business, we likely should not have. You know, we went into it without the financial backing to do it properly, and then with the pandemic and the effect of the pandemic going longer than we anticipated, it reduced the revenue streams more than we thought it was going to. We essentially ran it on a budget similar to what we did in Madison with Forward Madison, another 3rd division team. And so, you know, I thought that would be comparable. You know, it's a bigger market, but at the same time, there's more competition, which could be a bit of a wash. But as it turned out, the ticket revenue and the sponsor revenue were much lower than what we had in Madison, and then that put us in a bad position. So the lesson I think we learned is that, and it's not a lesson, I think we knew it going in, was that no two markets, no two situations are identical, and you need to be prepared to adjust when you don't hit your targets.
Like high level, what was the marketing strategy with 2 teams in the same city? Were you trying to capture just a tiny share of the fire or attract a different audience?
For the most part, a new audience. I mean, there's 9 million people in Chicagoland, and give or take 3 to 4 million of them have a high interest in soccer. And that's broken down into, you know, young adults, new Americans, youth soccer community. So if you got a target market of 3 million people, the one other men's outdoor pro soccer team, there's more than one pro team in Chicago. The Red Stars are there as well. But nevertheless, a market, even if you say 3 million, can support a lot more than one team. The Chicago Fire, you know, given the benefit of the doubt and say they averaged 15,000 fans a game last year. Well, actually, I think even their announced crowd was 12,000. So we don't even have to give them the benefit of the doubt. But 12,000 times, what do they have? Maybe 18 home games. I'm not real good at math, but I think that's about 200,000 fans. But, you know, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 of their season ticket, of their attendance is season ticket holders. So it's not really 200,000 unique individuals. It's probably closer to 110,000, maybe not even that, because you have a lot of fans going to 2, 3, 4 games a year. So 100,000 people are going to Chicago Fire games out of 3 million that care about soccer in Chicago. That means there's 2.9 million people in Chicago that care about soccer in Chicago, but they're not going to Chicago Fire games. So a new soccer team in Chicago doesn't have to convert a single Chicago Fire fan in order to make its business work. And our target was much, much less than 15,000 fans a game. Our target was 3,000 to 5,000 fans a game. We didn't hit it. We were closer to 1,000 fans a game. But to get even 3,000 fans a game, that's what, 50,000 over the course of the year. But if you use that same math with the Fire, some of them are season ticket holders, some of them go to 2, 3, or 4 games a year. You really only need about 15 to 20,000 unique individuals to care about your team and go to games on a regular basis to make the business work. So the marketing strategy was to create a club that would be relevant for a subgroup of people that care about soccer in Chicago. And we tried to build it from the bottom up. We used a fan advisory board. We did a crowd-funded branding with the name, the colors, and got the public involved in the building of the club. And it worked to an extent, but and I hate to use the pandemic as an excuse. It's a pretty valid one, as many businesses across America have found. But it made our ramp steeper than anticipated.
I guess using kind of your math, you would think 2 teams would potentially work in St. Louis as well, 2 pro soccer teams.
Look, I mean, I think people sometimes look at you cross-eyed when you use analogies from around the world, because America is not London, but London's got a dozen teams. Manchester, England has half a dozen teams. Buenos Aires has 18 pro teams, and America is becoming a soccer nation. Maybe not among people my age, but people your age or younger, it's a mainstream sport. So to expect to have multiple teams in one market is not only not possible, it's actually helpful. I think having multiple teams in the same market is a benefit to the first team, because it creates rivalries. It forces fans to make a choice, and it forces the clubs to create an identity. That they're the X team, defined by A, B, and C, and the other team has to differentiate themselves from the first team. So I think having multiple teams adds to the soccer conversation in the community and helps each other become more successful.
Do you feel like the lower level soccer in the United States is kind of what's making that challenging, though, to get multiple teams in one market?
There's aspects of a lower division team that is more interesting to some people than a top division team. Just like the reason there's minor league baseball teams in major league cities that are wildly successful. In Chicago, which I'm more familiar with, the Kane County Cougars, the Schaumburg Boomers, the Gary Railcats, Joliet Slammers. I mean, these are all minor league baseball teams that are doing very well. The people that live in those communities can just as easily go to Cubs and White Sox games, and some of them likely do, but they also go to their local minor league baseball team games because they offer something different, a more intimate game experience, a more inexpensive game experience, and a better connection to that community, whether it's because they know the players individually or that local stadium down the street better represents them. So similarly, a lower division soccer team can just as easily represent a subgroup, a sub-community as well or better than the major league team in town can.
Yeah, we definitely saw that kind of divide here when the announcement that St. Louis FC was folding. I think the fans were pretty divided on who was happy we were getting an MLS team versus some people would have just preferred, the small lower league team. It's kind of
yeah, and you can have both, but today I think there's a bunch of announcements about MLS 2 teams, at least I think Chicago, they announced the schedule and some other information. And it's going to be interesting to see how MLS Next Pro does in terms of the commercial end. I think just what everyone agrees that from a development standpoint is a good idea, and it's great that MLS teams are back to having reserve teams that get a good number of games, good funding. It's hard to create fan support though for a light version of the first team in the same market. And if it's a different brand, different ownership, different leadership, different stadium, then I think it has a good chance of success. But if it's a light version of the first team, it's difficult. I know I saw today the Fire will be playing their 2 games at SeatGeek Stadium and not charging admission, which is great. And I think for the hardcore fans that want to see, the future players, and that it's a great opportunity. But I can't foresee the point in the future where thousands and thousands of fans are going to be turning out for those matches on a regular basis.
Yeah, we had our first Next Pro preseason game last weekend, and it was pretty good attendance for a preseason game. I mean, it's probably maybe it was close to 1,000 people. It's pretty crowded.
Yeah, no, that's true. I suspect part of that though is it's
new, it's exciting.
It doesn't really exist. So
yeah.
It'll be interesting in 2 years what it's going to look like. Kind of, you say what you're saying is, will the excitement of the first team take away from the value of the second team?
Yeah, and I don't know that it's any different anywhere else in the world. I mean, I'm a Fulham supporter, and our reserve team is doing really, really well right now. But I'm pretty certain it's friends and family at their games. I could be wrong. I've never been to one, but I think it's more just a kind of a point of interest for the hardcores and not an attraction.
It's kind of like that family niche. It's more just to see your children kind of do it than draw in money and fans and support.
Those interested in the prospects and the small percentage of players that do make the jump.
So it'd bring you in, Will. It'd bring you in.
Not for sure.
Not necessarily the weathered fan.
Are there any steps in the process of launching a team that you think teams kind of often overlook, Peter?
In general, I think ownership and management thinks it's about them, and they build the teams from the top down mentality instead of bottom up, and recognizing that a club is a reflection of the community it serves, and it doesn't get input from its various constituencies. And I think they also oftentimes limit their research when they do look for input in the community. They limit it to the soccer clubs, youth soccer in particular, and they ignore all the various parts of the community that a soccer team represents. One of the best experiences I've had in building a club was with Indy 11, and it was because we really reached out to every aspect of Indianapolis, and it was obviously the soccer communities, but also cultural organizations, social organizations, government, businesses, and tried to make the team representative of all of them. And we created partnerships with organizations in each of these areas so that they ended up cross-promoting with us, and they ended up promoting Indy 11, so that, while our resources were limited, by essentially deputizing dozens and dozens and dozens of other organizations to promote us on our behalf, we were able to get a lot of mileage out of that, a lot of promotion that also had more credibility, because it wasn't just the team selling itself through its own lens. It was these other established organizations that have their own networks, their own audiences that may or may not have been soccer fans to begin with. But when they heard about this new soccer team from an organization that they were a member of or they already interacted with, it came with more credibility. I don't know that enough new teams do that. I think it's getting better and better and better. We see the new MLS team in Charlotte, which has kind of shot itself in the foot at some points along the process. They have managed to galvanize the Queen City around themselves. I think they've got 70,000 tickets already out for the opener, and I think they're sold. But in any regard, that's an incredible number, and I don't think they can do that just with the soccer community. I think that takes support from all parts of Charlotte. So that's wonderful to see. And, as time has gone on in not just MLS, but you see a lot of successful USL clubs, what New Mexico United has done, Sacramento, and then going back a couple decades, what Rochester Rhinos had done is really galvanize the community around the soccer team, because in the rest of the world, that's where you see successful clubs, is where the team is a representation of that community. And the big rivalries are when one community is going against a nearby community, and the game itself is an allegory for war. It's my town going to battle against your town, and the fans of that team feel like they're being represented by the club, not just on game day, but in their life. They're represented that way. In this country, it's great to see more and more soccer clubs become that manifestation of a community. We've had it in this country for a long time, but normally in other sports, and in particular in college sports, I think you see it in college football quite a bit, where the college football team is not only representing the alumni and the students, but also the city, the community, or even the state, and the passion that the fans feel for their college team is enormous. I live in Wisconsin, and I see it with the Green Bay Packers, as well as the University of Wisconsin Badgers, especially their football program. But that's the sort of passion that makes a sport special. And I think in the first couple decades of MLS, too many teams missed on that. I think when Portland and Seattle came in, you really saw that aspect. And that, I think, helped turn the tables on Americans' love for the sport.
Do you think a lot of, what you just spoke about also holds true for Forward Madison? I mean, their brand is, been a huge success, and
it's massive.
And a lot of St. Louis fans care. I don't know if it started because we always seem to play each other every season, maybe like 3 seasons in a row. And they've signed some former St. Louis FC players. Maybe that's the connection.
Yeah,
there.
No doubt. Forward Madison was, again, an example of getting community input into the process and building it from the bottom up. We did a particularly good job there with the supporters culture that was already in that community. We did that in Indianapolis as well. I'd be neglectful if I didn't mention Brickyard Battalion and the role they had in Indy 11's success. They were actually around before the Indy Pro Soccer team was. The Brickyard Battalion's existence is a big reason that the pro soccer team in Indy even started. In Madison, it was all of the Premier League supporter groups. For the most part, they all hung out at one soccer bar, but actually the Arsenal supporters went to a different bar. I kind of brought them all together, the leadership of these supporter groups, and gave them an inside passage into what we're doing. And they were able to be involved in the birthing of this team. and they had a strong influence in how this club was going to look, feel, and sound, and what the name of the team was going to be, what the colors would be, and the culture of the club. We tried to build it so it would reflect Madison itself, which is kind of a quirky community, young, liberal or progressive. And the supporter groups really took the lead on it. And they could have just said, no, I'm just going to be a Liverpool supporter. This local thing's not my thing. But they didn't. And I think it's because we gave them kind of the keys to the castle. We said, this will be your club. You tell us what you want, how you want to do it. And I think they appreciated it and had really good leadership. And they came together and ended up becoming the Flock. And then the Flock was the Supporters Association, and underneath it, a ton of supporter groups that all reflected a different either culture or demographic or friendship group. They had a real passion for Madison. So, and then the quirkiness of it, of the brand, the colors, the flamingo, the social media, in particular, the Twitter account gave it legs. So it wasn't just Madison or just Wisconsin, and it wasn't just St. Louis. It was not just the U.S. It was worldwide. You know, those original kits were sold in each of the 50 states and more than a dozen countries. So it was a special brand that connected with people. And again, it was because it was more bottom up rather than top down.
We've got Missouri kits taken care of when it comes to Forward Madison.
Yes, we both own one.
Andrew's got the drip kit, and I've got the Hawaiian goalkeeper kit.
Nice.
Yeah.
From like an outsider looking in, do you feel like St. Louis City or Charlotte have done a good job of kind of building from the bottom up, or what is your take on like those two getting started?
Yeah. I haven't looked at Charlotte at all, except occasionally I'll see something bad that they've done. Actually, I've seen more bad than good, so I'm a little surprised by their opening day attendance. St. Louis, I followed a little bit more closely. I think the St. Louis market as a case study is fascinating with soccer. The two cities I compare it to are Milwaukee and Cincinnati. The three of them are old heritage soccer communities. Cincinnati and Milwaukee, more German. St. Louis, I think, more Italian. Although in all three cases, various ethnic groups provided a heritage of soccer going back decades and decades and more decades. And so, all three of them, I think, have been thought of as soccer cities. And for a long time, everyone was saying, oh, just wait till there's an MLS team in this city, or Milwaukee, Cincinnati, or St. Louis, and it'll do really well because it's an old soccer city. But at the same time, the other theory for all three of those cities is they're baseball cities. Cincinnati and the Reds, and Milwaukee and the Brewers, and St. Louis and the Cardinals. In the summer months, those cities' attention is focused on baseball. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of people thinking that soccer would have a hard time elbowing its way into the public consciousness and in the hearts and the minds of sports fans. And I shared that trepidation until Cincinnati went and did what Cincinnati did. And they did it in USL. They were drawing 12,000 fans a game that first year, then 15,000, then 20,000 as a lower division team. It was remarkable. It helped, I think, that the Reds were not doing great during those years, but I think more importantly, they had good management, a good venue. They allowed the fans to be the team, be the entity, and the experience. And I think it also showed the demographics are changing in this country and in those three markets in particular. Again, I think if all you had in Cincinnati were people that were 40 years and older, FC Cincinnati would not have been successful. And I haven't seen the numbers, but I'm guessing a good 80+% of their fan base is under the age of 40. And baseball is an older demographic. The average age of a World Series viewer last year, I think, was 58. And the year before that was 57. And the year before that was 56, which shows you the trend is not going in a good place for baseball. And having a lockout that may cost regular season games probably isn't the best thing for their long-term health. Soccer in St. Louis and the MLS team, and I apologize, I tend to ramble, but getting around to your question, it seems like St. Louis has made a conscious effort to hook their wagon to the modern soccer fan in St. Louis, as opposed to the old heritage soccer fan. I'm sure they're not ignoring the old timers, because there's plenty of them out there, and you sure want them to be saying nice things about you and not bad things. For better or worse, St. Louis has really been, in my mind, has been looking forward and hitching their wagon again to I'll call it the young adults and the current youth soccer families, rather than worrying about those 1970s SLU championship teams and the folks that were connected to that. And I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you can provide respect to both groups, but I think it was probably really smart to make certain that the current modern day soccer participants and soccer spectators feel loved and feel like this is their team. I'd be shocked if St. Louis doesn't have really great supporter success, fan success, not just supporter culture, but overall fan success. I think it's going to be tremendous.
That's what we're hoping for. That's what we're thinking. It's been a great chat, Peter. It's great picking your brain, and we're rooting for you, hoping good things happen with Chicago House this coming season. And,
thank you, Will. Thank you, Andrew.
No problem. Thanks for coming out and chatting with us.
And hopefully we can talk to you again someday.
There you have it, guys. That was our interview with the Peter Wilt. Fascinating guy, founder of 9 clubs, including the Chicago Fire, who currently play in the MLS, Forward Madison, Green Bay Voyageurs, some of the teams with the absolute biggest marketing. You can go on Classic Football shirts right now and find Green Bay Voyager shirts, Forward Madison shirts, I think in better supply than even the Chicago Fire. So go on there, go look at Peter Wilt, go watch some Chicago House matches. If you're in Chicago, go support the man, Peter. And once again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. We will have our regularly scheduled content for you starting next week. We are football by the numbers.